I'm excited to get started on this everyday watercolor. Learn to paint watercolor in 30 days. So I'm going to start with the first 5 lessons, and I wanted to share those with you. So let's see what the first lesson is. All right, section 1. So we're going to be covering strokes, curves, straight lines and triangles, layout, compound strokes, and maybe if we have time we'll do the complex curves. That would take us through section 1. So let's get started. So the book I'm using is called Everyday Watercolor, Learn to Paint Watercolor in 30 Days by Jenna Rainey. And section 1 starts after a kind of like an overview of what you will need for getting started, and goes into technique. And the first thing she has you do is just make some swatches. She used a Prussian blue, and I'm using Old Holland blue mixed with Payne's gray. And she just has you start with very saturated dark, and then just dip your brush in the water and get some of the paint out to make it go lighter and lighter. And then when you touch some of the squares together, they will bleed into each other, and she calls that the wow effect, or the wet on wet effect. And I like that wow acronym. It's a great way to think about the wet on wet technique and how the colors she calls it exploding into each other. So here I'm just playing around with some of the swatches and different values. As you can see, the first 2 I did when I kind of brushed them into each other. They didn't really do anything because they were too close in value. So it works better when there's a light one and a dark one next to each other. Then you can really get that effect. So I'm doing now the next lesson, which was lines and circles. And she wanted to teach how to do the lines and make sure that you keep your hands steady. I didn't exactly follow all her guidance, and I apologize, my head's in the way. To fill it in, she has you tilt the paper a little bit to help the paint run, and the gravity kind of helps with that. After I paint a few circles, I practice the wow technique again and have some of the circles bleed into each other like she has in her example. I again am not doing everything exactly like she said as far as how to paint the circles. She does have very good step-by-step instructions if you're interested. So here is her example of the wow technique. Again, the wet on wet technique, making some of the circles touch. And if they're already dry, they're not going to bleed as much because they need to both be wet. This one's still wet enough that it's bleeding into the other one. And also, each paint pigment has its own properties. So like the really intense blue you see is the Old Holland blue, which I think is a phthalo blue. Then I've got the Payne's gray, and then I have a Caribbean blue by Old Holland. And this right here is a cobalt violet that is really cool to mix with. It really has a cool effect with the Old Holland blue. Not as much with the Payne's gray. Okay, that was fun. All right, now she's teaching about Analogous Colors, and how they are on the color wheel, just the two colors on each side of one of the primary colors. And it has a project where you actually use pencil and kind of sketch in your drawing before you work. And she has a bunch of hexagons, and I have different shapes here, and they kind of look like orange segments. She has you use oranges and reds, but I just want to keep what I already have. I loaded up so much blue on my palette, I just decided to stay with the same blue colors. And we're just practicing lines with the triangles and then the filling in, or just kind of blocking in the lines that you draw. So it's a good practice for practicing your lines and making sure that your lines are steady and straight and also of the same thickness. And then to lighten them, she suggests not adding white, but just to have less paint on your brush. And I agree, adding white just clouds it just muddies the color. There might be a few techniques or instances where the effect of white watercolor paint would be a good thing, and I do use like a white gouache for highlights sometimes, but for this purpose, yeah, white probably is not the best idea. Alright, so now we're going to make, she has us doing S and C curves and making leaves. And so we're mixing some, I have some cadmium yellow medium that I'm mixing with both the Caribbean blue and the Old Holland blue, just to give two different color combinations. Now I actually, when I mix greens, I usually always mix some red also, so I have a complement, but she just has us working into the two colors so that it's a lot cleaner look. And here we're practicing with the brush. You load it with the paint and apply pressure to make a thick leaf with a stem, and she has you do it twice, and that makes the full leaf shape. And she says sometimes if it makes like a little white space between both of the sides, that's kind of like where the highlight is, so she doesn't mind that. And I'm just gonna make a stem. I'm not doing this perfectly as far as what she's describing in the book, but it's kind of helpful. I'm getting kind of the ideas that she is talking about for the most part. And of course, all leaves are shaped differently. This is just one instance. You might want to make longer leaves or fatter leaves, or leaves with like an oak leaf that would have many different appendages on it. Oops, got a drop there, which I don't mind. I think that actually adds some interest to a painting. Alright, well, this was fun. These were the first 5 lessons in the book. I hope you enjoyed.